Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the Austrian Cultural Forum, New York. We are delighted to host this special event on the margins of the UN High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development 2024, conceived by the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens. We extend our heartfelt thanks to Chief Executive Officer Monika Fröhler and team for this cooperation. We are honored to present to you this evening such a distinguished group of experts. Above all, Caroline Edstadler, the Austrian Federal Minister for the EU and Constitution. Thank you, Madam Minister, for being with us this evening. I would also like to thank all panelists and very much look forward to a lively conversation. The Austrian Cultural Forum presents highlights of Austrian art and culture in the US, and it is also a platform for exchange focusing on sustainable development and democratic values. We are delighted that through hosting this event, we can contribute to raising awareness about the critical issue of ensuring food security in Africa. I thank you for your attention and wish you a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Ms. Tiamos, Deputy Director of the Austrian Cultural Forum, for your welcoming remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathering here today for trying to do our bit for ensuring food security in Africa. That's quite a call, because there are heaps of challenges, but also lots of innovations. And we actually need to torpedo them until 2030 to really make a difference. This event came into being, as was mentioned already, thanks to the Federal Chancellery of the Republic of Austria. Big thanks goes to Her Excellency Caroline Edstadler, the Minister for the EU and Constitution. Thank you for being here and spending precious time of your very dense schedule in New York with us. Also thanks goes to the Austrian Cultural Forum and of course to our dear friends from the Kofi Annan Foundation. It is actually the first event that the Ban Ki-moon Center does together with the Kofi Annan Foundation. So you're all witness to an historic kind of union of two great entities. You are responsible in the Kofi Annan Foundation also for the Kofi Annan Award for Innovation in Africa. And this is exactly the linking pin to Austria that we will also talk about later today. We are proud to have the Ban Ki-moon Center also represented here with an agri-champion, one of our very active change makers, whom we love to have featured here, because without your work and without your wisdom, we wouldn't be where we are. And then, of course, our friends and colleagues from CGIAR, IFPRI is represented here today. That's the International Food Policy Research Institute, for those of you who don't know the acronym yet. And of course, we will also hear a rapporteur kind of role from our EU Umweltbüro, which translates to the EU Environmental Bureau. So thank you also for being here as civil society representative. Now, my name is Monika Fröhler. I'm the CEO of the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens. And I have to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I'm truly myself passionate about the subject matter we have at stake today. The Ban Ki-moon Center is dedicating, I think, most of its work to ensuring climate action in matters of adaptation, in matters of smallholder farmer support, and in matters of shifting the needle to really ensuring food security becomes a reality. We hear the voices of amazing change makers. We try to elevate them with the help of SG Bahn, former Secretary General Bahn, and we try to be heard at the various climate conferences with many programs that we are undertaking, elevating the voices of women and elevating the voices of the youth. We are very proud that Austria this year leads us as a host for this event, because particularly the Austrian expertise and engagement is crucial in a day and age where SDG 2 is often overlooked. It is a special year because Austria is presenting its second VNR to the United Nations, and we are proudly listening to that surely tomorrow. And we do know that the Austrians have major engagements when it comes to food security, and also obviously with the Kofi Annan Award for Innovation to really try to torpedo the change. We will explore today how we can better include stakeholders, how we can better innovate for food security and how we need to invest more for ensuring food security in Africa. With having said this, it is my privilege to now give you the view of a video message by His Excellency Ban Ki-moon, the 8th Secretary General of the United Nations, who has left his remarks for us because he can't be here in person. But please, dear technicians, send us the video message.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to address you virtually today on the vital issue of food security and sustainable food systems in Africa. I extend my gratitude to the government of Austria, Federal Minister Caroline Edstadler in particular, for holding this timely event together with the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens and the Kofi Annan Foundation. I grew up during the Korean War. Often, we had just enough to eat, but rarely enough to fill our stomachs. I was hungry all the time. Everyone was. This has given me a deep appreciation of where food comes from. The transformation of our food systems is paramount to all the challenges we face. Global efforts must pull together to improve the livelihoods of the most affected. The UN FAO estimated that there were as many as 783 million people facing hunger in 2022. And Africa had the largest proportion of the population facing hunger, a staggering 20% of the continent, or 1 in every 5 people. Yet, Africa holds immense potential to address food insecurity globally. I strongly believe that Africa can not only feed itself, but also feed the world. In closing, I want to highlight once more that sustainable food systems are key to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. They are crucial for eradicating poverty, enhancing health, and combating climate change. I therefore call on global leaders, decision makers, and change makers to support research institutes to innovate, develop, and disseminate solutions, particularly to women and young people. This will be key to realize climate resilient and sustainable food systems through partnerships, knowledge sharing, and targeted investment. We can unlock Africa's agricultural potential, but this is possible only with joint forces. I hope today's discussions will spark a new urgency in all of us to work together towards a more sustainable, equitable, and resilient future for all, leaving no one behind. Thank you for your dedication and efforts. Thank you.
Thanks to His Excellency former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. Now, dear ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause to our special guest of honor, Her Excellency Caroline Edstadler, Austrian Federal Minister for the EU and Constitution, for her keynote.
Thank you so much, dear Monica, for the nice introduction. First and foremost, the dear Deputy Director of the ACFNY, thanks for hosting this really wonderful conference here, I may say. Dear Consul General, Madam Steinhäusl, dear panelists, ladies and gentlemen. As Monica already said, I'm the Federal Minister of the EU and Constitution in Austria, and in this capacity, I'm also in charge of coordinating the SDG implementation in Austria. And in this capacity, I would like to warmly welcome you to our joint special event with the Ban Ki-moon Center and the Kofi Annan Foundation. It is remarkable that we are bringing together the legacies of two former UN Secretary Generals today to discuss with great panelists innovations as a lever to ensure food security in Africa. It has also already been mentioned that I'm already really happy today that we can present our second voluntary national review on the national implementation of the SDGs, because I really do think this is a blueprint for many other countries, and we already got a lot of positive response on this hard work which has been done by my team, by the team here in New York, and by many others who contributed. I see, for example, also one of our members of the parliament in Austria, and everyone is really very engaged in this intense process, but it's worth to do so. And I'm also delighted that a lot of African countries are presenting their VNRs tomorrow too. 15 out of 37 VNRs presenters are from the African group, and 2 of these will be sitting beside us for the presentation on the same panel. This emphasizes African countries' strong commitment to the 2030 agenda, but not only the 2030 agenda, also the African Agenda 2063, which displays how the continent intends to achieve the vision of an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, driven by its own citizens. The 17 SDGs are aligned with the 20 goals of the Agenda 2063. For example, SDG 2 resonates with goal number 5, modern agriculture for increased productivity and production. And both agendas call for partnerships between all sectors of society. Partnerships are indeed more important than ever as the world is facing exceptionally challenging times. We had heard that in 2022, 783, if I got the number correct, people were starving from hunger. It's projected that 600 million people will still be undernourished globally in 2030. This suggests the immense challenge awaiting towards achieving the SDG targets to eradicate hunger, particularly in Africa. To build long-term resilience of Africa's food systems, it is crucial to strengthen international collaboration and leverage the potential of entrepreneurship and digitalization, especially in the continent with the world's youngest population. Ladies and gentlemen, we find ourselves at a watershed moment concerning technology. Artificial intelligence and emerging technologies will be key drivers of the rapidly accelerating digital transformation and offer countless opportunities, such as facilitating the acquisition of knowledge and skills, creating financial opportunities, and enhancing communication. We must encourage more citizens to use their creativity to tackle common challenges. Technology continuously changes, for example, farming practices, for example, also reducing crop loss and enhancing productivity. AI-driven solutions can optimize supply chains, predict crop yields, and mitigate the impact of climate change. At the same time, a persistent digital divide keeps many people in the world from accessing its prospective benefits, especially women and girls. Therefore, harnessing the possibilities presented by digitalization while ensuring that no one is left behind is a must. The Summit of the Future in September displays the opportunity to decide on a framework for strengthening global governance for both present and future generations. As a member of the leadership panel of the Internet Governance Forum, I'm honored to contribute to shaping the future of digital governance, especially through the Global Digital Compact. Such a framework is crucial for the multi-stakeholder action required to overcome data and innovation divides. In addition, the IGF also puts emphasis on bridging digital gaps in agriculture through harnessing innovation and balancing risks in the digital space. Ladies and gentlemen, it is 3 years ago that the Austrian Federal Chancellery, together with the Kofi Annan Foundation, the World Food Programme Innovation Accelerator, and the Austrian Development Agency, launched the Kofi Annan Award for Innovation in Africa. I'm delighted that, and I hope I spell it out correctly, El Haj Asi, co-chair of the High-Level Advisory Board and Jury, and also chair of the Kofi Annan Commission on Food Security, is taking part in the discussion today. The aim of the award is to identify and support promising African social entrepreneurs with technology-powered solutions to help them build strong foundations to scale and grow long-term, in honor of Kofi Annan's legacy and his commitment to a more just and equitable world. Each edition of the Kofi Annan Award focuses around one particular SDG. In the first edition, based around SDG 3, it has been great to see the scale of 3 African innovative digital health solutions. The initial success of the second edition, based around SDG 2, already highlighted the social impact. We received over 700 applications from 49 African countries. After the multi-tier selection process, 9 inspiring projects displaying ambitious agri-tech solutions, from circular solutions reducing post-harvest loss to smart supply chain improvements, have been nominated as 2024 finalists. In September, the teams come to Vienna for a high-level award ceremony. They will also forge meaningful connection with the Austrian ecosystem, building bridges for a partnership of equals between Africa and Austria. Moreover, an important characteristic feature of the award is the high proportion of female founders and employees. More than 65% of the 25 shortlisted ventures are female-led. So I always say the next generation is female, also on the continent of Africa. With the Kofi Annan Award for Innovation in Africa, Austria is making a concrete contribution to the 2030 agenda. And I have to be very clear, it is one of our success stories. Well, ladies and gentlemen, global food security is one of the most pressing challenges of our time. It has never been more crucial to act by investing in innovative and digital solutions that promote food availability and peace. Therefore, we need to work together across our networks to create a future where everyone has access to safe, nutritious, and sufficient food. I wish you a fruitful discussion and inspiring food for thought on sustainable innovations to overcome global challenges on our way towards 2030. And don't forget, this helps also us to create a best practice model and one of our champions in our Agenda 2030. Thank you so much and all the best.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will go right in medias res with the discussion, and it is my honor to again draw the highlight on our speakers today. We are welcoming with us El Haj Al-Si. He was already introduced as the chair of the Kofi Annan Foundation board, and in his capacity, he's a very experienced humanitarian, climate, finance, and I'd say expert on the UN system, but on global governance systems, coming all the way from Senegal to be with us here today. We are deeply honored that he is here. You're known for your distinguished contributions in global health, but also in global development. So thank you so much, As, that you're here today with us. Please, a round of applause for him. Furthermore, let me introduce to you Hafiz Mohammed Musa. He's co-founder and at the same time operations lead for Farm Assist Limited in Ghana. You have to imagine this is an agri-tech company that helps smallholder farmers in Ghana to use innovative solutions for their agri-businesses. And I do know, Hafiz, that you have really worked wonders and increased the productivity of hundreds, if not even thousands of farmers. So round of applause for Hafiz. And we too have a strong voice of research and science with Channing Arndt. He's Senior Director for Transformation Strategies at IFPRI CGIAR. Maybe some of you know that acronym. If you don't, you know it after this event. So IFPRI stands for the International Food Policy Research Institute and CGIAR for the Consultative Group on International Agriculture Research. Now, Channing has done a lot in matters of overseeing global agricultural and economic research. He has also spent years of his life in Mozambique and can really talk from his heart and from his experience there, hopefully during our panel. And it's wonderful to have you with us, particularly as you have been working on systemic economic transformations and also institutional capacity building and how that could best be done. So, ladies and gentlemen, we want to go in medias res. Let me start with you, dear As. I would like to know, we have heard about the Kofi Annan Award for Innovation in Africa, but how does it actually empower young change makers?
Yeah, thank you very much, dear Monica. I cannot hide my thanks and pleasure and gratitude all together, being here for, first of all, very personal, reasons, for having myself studied many, many decades ago, in Austria at the Graz University and then at the Diplomatic Academy of Vienna, again, many decades ago. And when you were talking about, links, with Austria, I think my own journey kind of illustrate, that link. In addition, I had the greatest privilege to have worked both under Kofi Annan and then Ban Ki-moon, so in my career. And all the issues that we've been discussing, today, were signs of commitments of these, two great leaders. And now, I think in the pursuit of the heritage, of Kofi Annan, the commitment of Ban Ki-moon, and also the commitment of the Austrian, government, we happen then to come together, to stimulate some kind of engagement of young people, in particular, to innovate in areas, that will be making a difference in the lives of their fellow citizens. And that is the reason why we first focus, on health, in the first round, and then this time around, on food security. And food security and food systems being at the intersections of many, different pathways. That also reveals a lot in what we do good and a lot in what we do bad. It reveals, many failures in governance. It reveals, failures in terms of leadership. It reveals also failures into so many promises made, to our fellow citizens. Too many promises broken, without accountability. It reveals also the different shocks and hazards that we've been experiencing over time. Those shocks and hazards becoming more frequent and then more severe, all the way from conflict, which are protracted, today. We know when they start, and nobody knows when they end. So shocks, are related to climate, but shocks do not necessarily lead to disasters. So I tend to say that, shocks are natural, disasters are human. If we are able, to anticipate, if we are able to prevent, if we are able to put early alert and early warning systems and early action and engage in a way that so that when we leave something in the communities that prevent them from falling into the same vulnerabilities, then we will prevent those shocks from becoming disasters. So these awards and the process of coming into the finalists is really to encourage, young people from the continent, to innovate and then bringing technology and then new digital means, to also improve, the interventions as far as prevention is concerned, as far as new solutions, are concerned. And I think, the minister very, very eloquently, talked about, the process so far. We are getting now to the final, list, and one will definitely be about, innovative solutions, bringing different pieces together in a circular manner. Others, will be focusing more on the prevention, side. What she didn't say in a humble way is that the Austrian Development Agency in Austria is giving 250,000 euro to each of the finalists that will help them in many ways, to take, their own work, to scale. And I think that is a great contribution, towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals.
Thanks so much. Your voice is heard, and particularly the young voice that we have here on the panel has the ideal segue. He is not yet, ladies and gentlemen, not yet a Kofi Annan Award winner, but maybe one day Hafiz will be. But he is in tech and transformation in his country, Ghana. And Hafiz, I would like to ask you, what do you see as the main challenges for smallholder farmers in Ghana, and how are you, with pharmacists, actually answering these challenges?
Smallholder farmers, usually, as the name implies, their problems are often thought as small, but in effect, it spirals to affect all of us. Now, in Ghana, smallholder farmers mainly have issues when it comes to accessing inputs, and this is as a result of other behaviors and other experiences in the past, because there's that level of trust that has been broken between farmers and other people that they work with, in terms of processing companies who in the past would advance resources to them to produce and then pay off afterwards in grains. Then also, if you are looking at it in terms of challenges, this is also hindered with limited capacity. So capacity in terms of the fact that climate change is moving fast, but farmers are not moving fast enough. We need new solutions are coming up every day. There's scientific research coming out every day, and farmers are not able to catch up immediately. And so what we do as pharmacists is that we leverage technology, first of all, to connect these farmers, smallholder farmers, to the agro-processing companies and other individuals by serving as a bridge between us, between the farmers and the investors. And so our technology allows farmers to be registered. Their farms are located, so it ensures traceability, trust, and accountability. And that gives, the processing companies and other investors in the value chain that confidence to want to advance resources to the farmers, because now I know I'm giving it to this person, and there's that guarantee that yes, the person is traceable, the person is working in an organized group of farmers, which is coordinated and managed by us as pharmacists, and so that level of trust has increased investments to smallholder farmers. And so, just to put this in perspective, we have the story I always like to tell is the story of a farmer called Abdullahi Yakubu in the Yendi district in northern Ghana. So this is a farmer who has capacity of up to 5 acres, but only does 1 acre due to the limited access to input. So in our engagement with him 3 years ago, now he cultivates about 5 acres and has increased his productivity, profitability, and now has more money to save, and even living healthier and having money to seek further healthcare in terms of living a better and a dignified life than we see smallholder farmers live.
That's amazing, and I do know technology plays a key role for pharmacists as well, and we will come back to that, how the new technologies actually are even fostering further engagement. But thanks for the story. It illustrates well what pharmacists does. Channing, obviously over to you. We heard from Hafiz already, science and research is out there, but often it's difficult to translate it actually to the ground. But I would love to hear from you, what are key considerations in scaling scientific innovations that you have already found with IFPRI and CGIAR?
Yeah, I think one of the chief points is we really want a lot of it, right? In Africa, we're looking at doubling of food demand roughly over the next 30 years. And what we don't want is just current techniques running out over the same, over larger areas, right? So you want this, this transition to be to greater technologies. So there's a need kind of across the board. And this is desirable from all sorts of perspectives. One from a livelihoods perspective for people on the continent. It's desirable from an environmental perspective in the sense that you're not rumbling out onto using new resources. It's desirable from our own environmental perspectives because if Africa is importing lots and lots of food, you're just going to be pushing production boundaries in Brazil, in Europe, in the United States, and elsewhere. Africa is going to be something like 50% of the total increment in food demand, 40 to 50%, depending on who you ask. So they're extremely important. Innovation is just incredibly specific, right? If you're talking about, is it, vitamin A sweet potato, right, which is good for certain specific deficiencies. What's the problem there? It's orange, and their sweet potato didn't used to be orange. So how do you get them to eat an orange thing that didn't used to be, orange? That's one aspect. Other times, technologies just sort of move. Some of the biotech has that characteristic that it's really quite similar in what you need to do, but it's just better. It resists disease, it yields more, and so forth. Other times you have other sets of issues when you're crashing into social barriers, and you need to worry about women's empowerment and so forth. But you need a concerted effort across the board at this point.
Can you give us an example of a successful biotech story that you have been backing?
So the continent is changing its views on biotech. I think fairly substantially. And I think one of the things that's happening is it used to be that biotech was kind of, it was Monsanto, and it was a couple $100 million each time you had to come up with an innovation. Now with gene editing, you can, if you know what you're doing, you can gene edit for around $10,000, and get something. And so you're often getting, the National Agricultural Research System of Uganda came up with a gene-edited banana, and plantain is a staple that resisted a certain mildew that was a real problem. And this is somebody, you're a small country relatively too. These are people you grew up with, right? They're in the experiment station there, and it's a far less worrisome thing. So we're seeing, for example, in Nigeria now, the release of the first genetically modified food crop in sub-Saharan Africa, outside of South Africa, and that is being tested now. And it's these things have things that you really want these days: heat resistance, drought resistance, pest resistance, better nutritional profiles. These kinds of things. So I think what you're looking at is those are some of the success stories that we're looking at.
I'm happy not in the first round that we had not only to look at the challenges but also at the opportunities that are there. But we've heard about broken promises and we've heard about lost hope. So let me pick that thread up, although it's kind of heavy. But looking into the food system, let's zoom out once more. Do we need an altered food system? And I, of course, ask you, dear As, because you are heading a commission that is looking exactly into that question. And I'm curious, the Kofi Annan Commission that was launched last year in December on the food governance system, what do you make of it? What do you want the audience to know?
Thank you, Monica. We need, first of all, to scan the landscape and then really deepen our understanding about all the dimensions that come into play when we talk about food systems and then the governance of food system. And I think the work of our commission in the first phase was really about that, to understand what do we mean by governance in our food system. We have a formal governance of this food system. We have the multilateral agencies, particularly the Rome-based agencies, that are focusing around that. We have national governments, as well, that have the primary responsibility, to look into responding to the needs of their own citizens. But we have very important other stakeholders that we do not think about right away. Private sector that plays an extremely important role. The role of trade and the whole chain, between agriculture and everything that happens, all along the chain until the food come into the households or, in the mouths or, of people. And all of that is part of the governance, system. And if then we categorize it, so I look into 3 pillars most of the time. One of the pillars is science, that do research, deepen the understanding, looking at the different aspects. Another pillar is politics. Politics can be part of the solution or part of the problems. When we talk about, the promises that are made and broken, it is often politics. Are we getting the priorities right, at the national level? Are we investing in those areas, that matters most, in our different countries? But also we talk about activism, today. And I often say that the governance have left the boardroom because now every observer, can have an opinion, on how things will run or not. Every blogger can influence, what is happening or not. And it is particularly important because it can go, in 2 different ways. We are flooded with infodemics, what we call today, with fake news, that are undermining, science and politics. But then we can also use that in terms of innovations and then the social media, to bring, on the table all the issues, that matters. And then that the first analysis then point out, to certain areas of focus that are very critical for the governance of food system. One is related to nowadays, climate and then food system. The other one is, how do we prevent, shortages and then food, all sorts of insufficiencies that we are encountering. And then another area is, what are the social safety nets, that exists, in terms of social protections, so that the most vulnerables, will not continue to face, those multiple deprivations. And I think with those areas of focus, we are entering into, domains, that can lead us, to make some very concrete recommendations, both in terms of what needs to change, in the global food system governance, but also how the other stakeholders and other dynamics that matters and that were neglected so far will be taken on board, to have a more sustainable type of governance in our system. And I think we are right now at the beginning of the consultation. This morning, we were having an in-depth discussion analysis with IFPRI, and we will continue to do so. We are engaging with Brazil in the G20, process, and I think 2 of our commissioners, will be in Brazil, now, and then talking to farmers, as well. So we are engaging also with researchers and then activists, from climate and others, to see how what we can propose that could be actionable. Because we can all say, let's reform the global food governance system. Well, everybody will applaud and then it will not happen. Let's, change things, at the more macro level. And then everybody say it's pertinent, it will not happen. What we really would like to land on, what would be the specific, governance systems and mechanisms, that we can make recommendation about and then that will be actionable. So we're at the beginning of the journey. I'm very confident, that 10 months, down the line, we will be able to present to you with some very concrete recommendations in that area.
Fantastic. 10 months down the line. Quick poll, who will want to read the recommendations of the Commission? I hope that many hands are going up. I definitely do want to read it. And this is your unique chance, Channing and Hafiz actually, to make your voices heard. Do you want to react to what we just heard? Like, research will be a key element of the Commission recommendations. Do you think that it will alter something for your universe, and Hafiz also for you? I would love to hear your reaction on what was just mentioned.
Sure. I think one of the places, to get specific is in rice, right? So you had an El Nino event in the Pacific. All of a sudden, the Pacific, on the eastern side is warm, and weather patterns around the world are more or less predictably moving around, and India is projected to be dry. India is the world's largest rice exporter, and it says, well, we're not going to export rice anymore. And so, in West Africa, Indonesia, this is a real shock, even though they didn't really have huge faith in international rice markets to begin with. And so you have countries all over Africa and in Asia thinking about what are they going to do since they can't depend on the international rice market for imports. And so there's talk about, drives for self-sufficiency and so forth. And I think there's some justification for that, but there's also a justification in the governance system, and especially this is one where this is South-South everywhere. The largest producers are sort of members of the Global South. The largest consumers are members of the Global South. The US, Europe, other places, we produce little bits of rice, but not that much. This is really dominated, by the Global South. And I think it's a good opportunity for the Global South to try to get together at least a coalition of the willing to deal with the issues in global rice markets that are very much in the face of policymakers, especially in West Africa, but also Indonesia and other major importers, and the exporters as well. I don't think they are so keen on this bounciness either, at least outside of India. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
One very specific thought.
It's a global, definitely a global issue, but I hear, Channing, you are for such a commission and for reforming the food governance system. It's direly needed. Hafiz, what would a message of the youth and women be, particularly to a commission as it exists?
For me, or for us, we'll look at it in two folds. One, by improving inclusion. So by inclusion, we're not just talking about young people and women, but we're also looking at extending it to include people with disability. But more specifically in terms of the inclusion, and I like the fact that you said that some of your team are talking with farmers to really get to understand some of the issues. And I hope that it's done extensively so that it covers the diversity in terms of the issues that are at play. But amidst reforms and all the ideas that we have globally, it all boils down to what I always say, the elephant in the room, which is climate fund. Currently earlier today, I was at the launch of the Africa Sustainable Development Report, and then it indicated also that about 7%, only 11% of climate funds gets to Africa. That's it on a general climate level. But a study by Climate Focus highlighted also that less than 1% of climate finance actually get to smallholder farmers. And so if we want smallholder farmers to be resilient, to be able to adapt to climate change, to be able to produce healthy food, and they themselves being healthy, then it means that we need to finance their actions. And that is where, at that level of reform, then it means that we have to look at the financing architecture and see how they can model new solutions that actually reaches the farmer to take actions.
I would really like to spend some time on painting a picture of hope with you, gentlemen. Because let's pretend we are 5 years down the line. And maybe, Hafiz, I can continue with you. What has changed for your particular entrepreneurial enterprise in 5 years down the line? What has been altered in the food system, if you could put down a wish?
First and foremost, looking at it contextually from where I come from. So in northern Ghana, we have just one rainy season, and that often affects our productivity in terms of, if we are looking at it, taking agriculture as a career. So you have farmers just do about 4 to 6 months farming, and then it's more like laid back for the rest of the year. So in 5 years down the line, I'm looking at us taking advantage of rainwater, low-cost irrigation investments, and applying them to make sure that we're able to produce food all year round. And
technology, because we spoke before,
yes.
You need data.
Yes, and that's where I was getting to. So in terms of technology, currently what we do is that we are building an AI machine learning model that detects plant diseases for rapid response. And what that means is that for an AI model, it needs a lot of data, it needs a lot of practice, it needs a lot of learning in terms of images and videos to be able to increase our prediction accuracy. And what that means is that we'll be collaborating with partners. IFPRI is here, and their related organizations also. I remember earlier we spoke briefly about it, and then you mentioned IITA, which definitely will be contracting. So down the line, we see that interplay of best practices, adoption of technology, catalyzing and accelerating our actions, and then we hope that the hunger that we see, gets eliminated, not reduced.
It would be wonderful if this event actually helps you to connect the dots between existing data in science and agripreneurs like yours who are in dire need of exactly that information. Paint me a picture in 5 years' time. What has changed to the better?
Okay, I'm older, so I'm going to go back. I'm going to go 30 years, and take a long run. So in 1990, I was Peace Corps volunteer. I went to be Peace Corps in Morocco, right? And at that time, about 40% of the world, not quite 40, couldn't afford enough calories, not even a healthy diet, enough calories, right? That number down, and it's basically been monotonically coming down until we hit COVID, right? COVID was a shock, but came to about 8-9% now. It's around 30% of the world, and absolute numbers falling as well. It's really a monumental achievement over that period. So then you run forward what's different over the next 30 years and what drove that over the previous 30. And a driver of it was really a lot of increases in food production. It's a food-based indicator that poverty is sort of based in ability to afford, a basket of goods that gives you a sufficient amount of calories. And so in order to achieve that, for the world to do that, there had to be just sort of a lot more food out there. And one of the positive points over the next 30 years is we just don't have to produce as much food. Africa is a concentration, right? It's a doubling. South Asia, another concentration, around 40% on a much more stressed resource base. And everywhere else, it's pretty small, right? And the total is quite a lot smaller. So we have a much more geographically concentrated issue, and we can focus our resources, and we should, in Africa and South Asia for these technologies. This is where you have, all of the things that we want the food system to do coming together, healthier diets. We want it to, be a greenhouse gas sink. We want to get rid of all this loss of biodiversity. It's the world's largest employer still, so we want it to give better livelihoods, more resilient livelihoods. We have all of these desires, and these are very much concentrating a lot of it in Africa and South Asia. And if we can get those to work there, then we can focus in the US, in Europe, in Brazil, and elsewhere on some of the other issues that we need to deal with, like the environmental issues and so forth, and allocate our resources in that direction. So we do have a lot of challenges. Globally increasing a hell of a lot more food is not one of them. It's a much lower order task, and that does give us a bit of breathing room to work. But we need to recognize that we have a much more sort of varied task now, with really Africa and Asia standing out as the crucial places.
Focused bundling of resources, more use of digitalization. We do know about prevention already, but still let me ask you, 5 years after the recommendations are passed, what has happened?
I think 5 years down the line, there are some processes that are underway that will be accelerated for many reasons. So recent events, like COVID and the Russia-Ukraine war, have led, to the realization, that this heavily dependence, on some of the global markets and then processes, need to change, and it is changing. For example, so the decolonization process of food production and then food systems, in Africa will change dramatically, in 5 years' time. Why are we dependent so much on rice that we do not produce? Why? Because there was a colonial system that forced you, to produce peanuts, to be exported, and then rice from Indochina, to be imported. That was pretty much the French system. And that is the reason why there is no it is not just a coincidence, when you see the heaviest dependence on rice, it is, mainly on the former French colonies, in West Africa, so in particular. I think with inclusion, as you rightly say, of farmers and the validation of, local traditional knowledge and practices, plus bringing in our technology and innovation for the use of the immense arable land, that is available, which is not used. the harvesting of water and less dependent only on rains, which are short cycle of rains, to new methods, of irrigations, and then again bringing together, the traditional knowledge, the inclusion, and technology and innovation, together is already starting, and I think we are seeing also with the new engagement, of young people that are living now more and more the urban centers and then going back, to the rural areas, better equipped, with financing and technology to make better use of these arable lands. We'll see that, happening. And I think, if I may have used you an example of that, and there are many of you, how we can provide, the support that is needed, to bring a critical mass, of that. And I think we will see that bearing fruits, in 5 years down the line. And what we're doing today here, the partnerships, that we are building, the work of our commission, the Kofi Annan Awards, those prizes, that will be stimulating, those kind of entrepreneurship, all of that, I think, will start bearing fruits. And I have great hope that we will see change.
Wonderful. We sort of close this session on a note of hope. Also, the Ban Ki-moon Center is trying to, with its agri-champions, to make the voices heard. Policymakers get demand papers at all of the climate conferences, at the COPs now coming up in Baku, but then of course Brazil being a very big milestone COP that we are gearing towards, with being informed by changemakers like you, Hafiz, and carrying your voices forward. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your opportunity to ask this stellar panel any question that you might have from what you have heard, or things that might be completely different from what we discussed on ensuring food security in Africa. We have a roving microphone, and if I see an indication of an icebreaker question, we could start right away. Anyone? Yes, Aoshi, please. Would you hand the microphone to the lady in the second row? Yeah.
Hi, this is Ayushi from the Kofi Annan Foundation. I'd like to pick your brains on innovation and the challenges around research and development on the African continent. We know that technology equity around access is a critical issue, and if we don't have that, then we're looking at innovations being stuck in richer countries and in the hands of corporations. So what's the landscape for innovation truly in Africa at the moment? Across the continent, but maybe particular national experiences could be good to hear. Thank you.
Brilliant. We do have here experience from Senegal, Ghana, and Mozambique, but actually continental experience with US. I would like to collect more questions. Yes, I see the gentleman in the black shirt.
Hello, Excellencies. Thank you again in regards to attending. Your time, energy, and effort is appreciated globally. I wanted to ask how you felt about the Great Green Wall projects in Africa as well as in China, as well as the Belt and Roads initiative as being avenues of creating food forests in which could potentially feed Africa.
Great, Green Wall. And could you still say your name and where you're from?
Oh, yeah. Brooklyn. My name is Keith Watkins. I'm from Brooklyn, New York.
Excellent. Wonderful. And then here in the third row, Monica.
Hi, my name is Monica. I'm from the Austrian Ministry of Social Affairs. Thank you so much for your contributions. I was wondering, one question to you, Mr. El Hadj. So today, 2 countries are presenting their VNRs at the UN, 2 of the poorest countries of the world, Yemen and South Sudan, with extreme poverty rates of over 80%. And I was wondering if you're also collaborating with these countries. And to Mr. Channing Arndt, because you mentioned genetically modified organisms, and one of the big problems there is that you can only use the seeds for 1 year, right? And then farmers have to buy them every year and they get indebted. And I was wondering if your genetically modified organisms also do that, or if you can use them for multiple years. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I did see more hands up. So 2 more to take, and we are all taking notes to answer them. Lady with the wonderful headscarf.
Hi, I'm Sharon. I was a Kofi Annan changemaker in 2021. I have a question about financing food security in Africa. From what I understand, both energy poverty and food insecurity on the continent are the two biggest challenges we're facing right now. And Hafiz, you mentioned earlier some of the climate financing trends that we've seen. I don't know much about them within the food security space, but I know within the energy space, the consensus is we need a ton of investments from the private sector for us to decarbonize our energy systems. So it seems we cannot rely only on multilateral like funding or concessional financing. We have to tap into the private sector. How does it look within the food security space to engage the private sector for investments?
Thanks a lot. And I saw a question at the very back. Franz Fehr.
Thank you. My name is Franz Fehr. I'm an agricultural ecologist from Austria. And we've got three male experts on the podium. I would be interested what you think your role of the role of women in agriculture in Africa is, especially when it comes to subsistential agriculture. I think it's very key.
Thank you so much. So we have a very great choice of questions on inclusion. Ayushi, thank you very much. But then also on the Green Belt and Road, on Yemen, Sudan, and modified food, and then also on the energy sector, private energy sector, plus women in agriculture. So lots to choose from. Who wants to kickstart it? Pick and choose. Yep. Please. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. I will just touch on some of these issues, and I'm sure my colleagues can elaborate further. Let me start with the last one. I'm a father of 4 daughters that I'm promised to them that I will never sit on a panel that is only consisting of men. And if you throw about 3 experts, I think you should count Monica also as an expert. And then if she was not here, I would not sit, in that panel at all. Just, to make a statement which is not just for the image, but something that we really commit to, very clearly. So having said that, of course, if you look at, agriculture on the African continent, the role of women, we do not need to elaborate further on it. It is an obvious one. But there are major issues, that need to change. And that is, part of the governance, as well. Access to land, for example. So in a number of countries, because of the traditional, I would say, traditional ruling systems, women don't own lands and don't have access to land. And then when we have the normal form of governance, that should change that, reforms have started too slow, too little. And I think we do not have the time to wait for another 30, 60 years, for this, to change. What has changed, dramatically in this world today is that the world is changing at a pace, that we've never seen before. And I don't think that this new generation, including younger women and girls, will have the patience, of waiting another 50 years for change happening. But we should and cannot shift the whole burden of that change on the shoulders of women alone. That is something which is good for women, good for the family, good for the communities, and good for the countries. And I think in everything we do, we should make sure, that also that inclusion is really translated into concrete action. And talking about, the Kofi Annan Awards, for example, the minister was highlighting the fact that 65% of the applicants, were women. So I cannot tell you who will be the 3 finalists that will be getting the 250,000 euros, to go back and then create a critical mass, through their work. But hold us accountable. There will be definitely women there as well, if not, so in the majority. Have we made progress? Yes. It is enough? Absolutely not. And I think it's a responsibility of all stakeholders to make that happen. And I'm sure that Hafiz, who's so concerned about inclusion, will say something about it. Briefly on energy and financing, I think you're right. Decarbonization, is key. And we can and should not put into contradiction, the use of fossil energy, versus, development, or versus, the acceleration, of the changes that we would like to see in our agricultural system. Most of these countries that are facing, food insecurity, that are the countries also that have the greatest sources of solar energy that are not, being used and are not being used, appropriately. If we're not careful, it will be used for something else. I can tell you there are already some countries, including very rich countries, who are neighboring Africa, who are buying hectares, thousands of hectares of lands to have, solar plants for an energy, to go back, to their own countries, so that they can also face, their decarbonization, target. So if we can provide it to others, why not, for us? I think financing, innovation, and those transition in energy should also happen there. And I think we need to take that even as a benchmark and indicators in the programs, that we are designing and implementing. Let me finally touch on Yemen and South Sudan. Yes, we work in those places. And I personally have been working directly in South Sudan, in Yemen, because unfortunately, those are those places where you have people facing those multiple challenges with climate, conflict, and all other deprivations, that you are thinking about. And when we talk about walking the last mile and then leaving no one behind, I always propose, that we make that last mile our first mile of response. In order to make a difference, frankly, then globally, we have to start there where the needs are greatest, and where the needs are greatest are often those places where it is, hardest to work and then hardest to live. So, unfortunately, the humanitarian space is shrinking and shrinking by the day. So, I sent people to South Sudan. I went myself and sent people to South Sudan, to Yemen, to Syria, and then to Afghanistan. And I lost 53 colleagues, that you send there, losing their lives in the line of duty. So it does not mean that we shouldn't do it. We will continue to equip ourselves better. We will continue to negotiate, the humanitarian space. We need to be there because that's there where we need it most, to continue to do the work. So that's all I can say about South Sudan and Yemen. But we could talk about, Mali today, the Liptako-Goma area in the Sahel. We could talk about Niger. We could talk about northern Nigeria, the Lake Chad Basin, all the same. But that's exactly, there where we are needed most, and then that's there also where we continue to do work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your contribution. Further responses? Yeah, Channing?
Sure, I'll echo the point on finance. Absolutely there needs to be a lot of finance, and especially in the energy area and into finance adaptation, right? And it's not going to all come from official sources, and it's not all going to come from the government either. And so, ways to get private finance to move and how have it efficiently allocated is crucial, and that's in the energy space where there's a lot of opportunity and in the food space. On technology, right? There's important to make a distinction between genetically modified organisms and gene editing. And with gene editing, you can genetically modify, but you don't necessarily have to, right? It's just a speeding of a breeding process. It just happens. There's GMO cassava, right? It's vegetatively propagated. It's not a hybrid, right? So it's just a process that can be applied, and it's a decision whether having generally it does depend on conditions, but broadly the hybrids will yield, provide a bit better performance sometimes almost across the board. But you do need to buy the seed every year. Under some conditions, that's not true, and so open pollinated varieties can be very, very properly deployed. And certainly there's research to, you can gene edit an open pollinated variety just as well as you can a hybrid. So that's just yeah, I mean, in order to get the developments that you're going to need, it's not, the food system is connected with roads and rails and ports and marketing systems and so forth. Infrastructure investment, you're not going to get the food system that you want without the infrastructure investment that you need to support that. And that's another part of the financing that needs to be dealt with. So that's a big part of the challenge. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. That was also the Belt and Road question, kind of. You need infrastructure investment, not only from China, but from elsewhere as well. Yeah, Hafiz, what do you want to take up?
So I'll start with the technology and access experience. So in Ghana, for instance, mostly in major towns, you have both network coverage, internet coverage working very well, but we move out into very rural areas. Some have very good access, some do not. But what often helps is the fact that depending on your solutions, you're able to tailor it based on the locations. So if it's areas where you need to, for instance, work with apps or, for example, digital tools that work offline, then it means that you, at the development stage, you need to make sure that you make those available offline. Also in terms of, for example, using technology to promote good agronomic practices in terms of extension, what we'd often do is that you have videos of extension related to a particular issue based on the needs of the farmers at that particular location. And once you have it offline, then it means that you are in an opportunity to play it out to them in a group, and then you're able to have discussions and then able to practice it out in a demo field nearby. So definitely it's not where it's supposed to be, but there's progress in that light. But like you said, we'll still have to do a lot of work to make sure that there's that equity in terms of access for internet experiences. Then also in terms of the role of women in agriculture, I mean, we all know it cannot be understated. They are very key to the food systems. For example, as part of our work with the Agri Champions, the demand paper we developed last year and presented it to world leaders, and still engaging on a day-to-day basis with policymakers, is to make sure that processes within agriculture, within the food systems, are tailored to the needs of women. And more specifically, we are looking at extension services investments, making sure that these extension service providers or extension officers are reaching women directly and offering them the best advice possible to be able to produce the best food for us all. Then also you are looking at tailoring capacity building to the needs of women. Now, this is essential because most of the times, essentially when you are looking at centralized trainings, many women are not able to participate due to some socio-cultural barriers, and so adapting trainings to their needs. For example, as simple as changing, say, the time of a training from, say, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. makes a big difference in the lives of women to be able to participate actively and take the learnings back to the field. Then also, more importantly, is the connection with research and policy to action. And that is where, we have be able to apply and translate the learnings from research organizations as well as the policies into more context-based, more local languages for farmers to also be able to understand what is happening at the policy level and from the science perspective, and know how to apply them and yield the best results possible for the food and that's improvement in the livelihoods that we all dare to achieve.
Obviously, I've learned a lot from Hafiz, but ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, I learned a lot from our female agri-champions, Tabitha Inshiro, Caroline Moko. We tried to invite many female speakers to this panel. So, Franz, to your question, many actually, until very last moment, said they couldn't come. And indeed, I also made a pledge as an international gender champion not to sit on a panel with only men. And here do I sit as a moderator of a man panel. But still, ladies and gentlemen, round of applause for the incredible insights that they shared. Thank you very much to you. Thanks a lot. We have one more highlight for you because we had a rapporteur taking good notes of everything that has been said. And imagine you're put into the task of summarizing all of the things that have been mentioned. It is tricky. But we have an amazing rapporteur in Bernhard Slana-Bitnik. He is representing as Vice President of the European Environmental Bureau, but also as a CSO participant of Austria. And Bernhard, can I ask you up to the lectern to give us your condensed synopsis of what you heard today in this room? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica. I don't do the gender balance, make it much better. So sorry, apologies for this. But and also the task. But it's a big one. But dear distinguished guests and speakers and dear audience and friends, I'm first of all it was incredibly interesting to listen and to hear about what you're doing on so different levels and the impact you have. And just what I heard is that food security, food system resilience is becoming an ever more important lever for social stability and a sustainable future. We heard a lot about the geopolitical situation. We heard a lot about climate. I would add even more the triple planetary crisis, which is climate, which is the biodiversity loss and also the pollution to this. Personally, from my environmental organization's perspective. We heard that 600 million people will be undernourished globally by 2030. The social impact around the world will be immense, hitting rural farmers, but of course also urban consumers. In particular, Africa, but also we heard about Asia, will be hit. We heard from our speakers about broken trust. We heard about broken promises, shocks that are leading to disasters. We heard about climate funds that are only 7% are going to Africa and even less to small farmers. And in general, the problem with the financial architecture. But we also heard incredible positive things and developments, how to develop resilient food value chains, about small farmers that are organized, talking about Ghana, in organized groups to build trust with investors that leads to higher production eventually. We heard about biotech and genetic editing that leads to heat, drought, and pest-resistant crops. We heard about food systems and its pillars, science, politics, activism, governance, all this together, all these different stakeholders that play a role that makes it so complex also to overcome problems. But also about Commission working on reforms with specific recommendations and how to begin the journey. We heard about the difficulty of the last mile, but of course also the difficulty of beginning and the first mile. We heard about the decolonization of food production, rice versus peanuts, when you remember the example. We heard about AI and the emerging technologies as key drivers, optimized supply chains, predict crop yields, mitigate the impact of climate change, and eventually bridging the digital gaps. So overall, in a nutshell, what I learned, what I take away, was how important the transformation of our food system is and how paramount it is to empower local communities, in particular women, youth, and other marginalized groups, using the advancements of the digital age, and also to have a deep understanding and appreciation where our food comes from. A lot of food for thought, as we already heard in the beginning, and I wish you all the best, and thank you very much, and I will hand over to Monica now. Thank you.
How difficult, wow, but congrats, you did a fantastic job. Speaking of food, I stand between you and some food that we have prepared for you, a small reception that we want to welcome you all to downstairs. Please do come and network, because our conversation has just started. I think we saw that there is much more that needs to be discussed, and I'm sure we can tap into your brains as well. Our speakers have been fantastic, and yes, we will work on the gender balance. I have seen the audience, the gender balance is re-established with all of the participants here. So thank you very much for your turnout. Thanks to the Austrian organizers who have made this happen, and of course also big thanks to my team, the Dear Ban Ki-moon Center, that were the great spirits behind this event happening at all. Ladies and gentlemen, onwards and upwards, let's do what we can for a food system that is safe, secure for all. Thank you.